Welcome to today's coffee break. Can everyone see my slides? How to engage
Yep.
your audience online and in person? Great, thank you. As Randy mentioned, I'm Marianna Swallow. You are welcome to check out my website. The web address is up there. And I do have a free monthly newsletter where I send out tips about speaking. And also lately, I'm sharing what I am baking during the quarantine. So you can see that monthly if you like. So for our time together today, this is, like Randy said, a casual chat. If you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat box and Randy will share them with me. As we work today, feel free to unmute yourself and please participate. I will have a question or two and I want to hear from you. I'm going to ask you to think about some things for yourself, so you might want to grab a pen to write something down. And just in these next 10, 13 minutes together, please have fun. So here's what I want you to think about. I imagine everyone's on this call to hear about how you can engage your audience because you either are tasked with presenting or running a meeting or presenting in a meeting. I want you to think about any experience you've had in your life. It doesn't have to be a work thing. Think about a time you did feel engaged and enjoyed the experience. You can think all the way back to preschool. Did your teacher do something cool? Maybe there was a conference you were at or a meeting you were at where you saw something cool or enjoyed the meeting. You know, maybe someone brought in a magic trick. Maybe someone showed a video. Maybe there was live music playing. Whatever it was, think about something that you did find engaging and fun and enjoyable and write it down. We can give you a few seconds to do that. And does someone have one they can share with us? Go ahead and unmute yourself. And what came up for you when I asked you to think about something that you did find engaging and enjoyable? What'd you write down? Someone share.
I wrote down Garth Brooks concert.
And what did you like about it?
I just find it very engaging. He's a good entertainer. You never think about anything but Garth Brooks when you're in a Garth Brooks concert.
That's what I've heard. Okay, so he's a very engaging entertainer. My understanding is he's very bantery with the audience. Is that true?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so think about that, the banter, the back and forth. Anyone else have one that they wrote down that they want to share?
If it's easier to what I wrote down is the 2 times that I've taken storytelling classes. Those have all been engaging experience, and that's probably writ large across all the classes and specific to each individual class.
Okay, and Jake, can you think of one specific reason why a storytelling class was engaging?
I think because there's a really strong sense of active listening amongst all the participants in the room. So when one is telling a story, everyone's actively listening and engaged in what you're saying. And then when someone else is telling a story, you're also with them. So there's a broad give and take that happens in those events.
Okay, so notice that, the broad give and take. So this is what I want you guys thinking about, these kind of specific things that make it enjoyable for you and how can you translate that to your experiences. But I'm going to give you some specific techniques to do and use, and some of them are easier than you would think. What I do ask you to think about is when you are planning for something like this, online versus in real life might be a little different. A lot of people say, or a lot of people ask me, you know, well, how do I plan something like this? Because it's going to be drastically different than it is online versus in person. Not necessarily. You'll plan the same because ultimately the goal of when we're online versus in person is the same. We want to communicate, we want to get information across. But when it comes to presenting or being with an audience online, you do need to do more planning ahead of time. You do need to put a lot of thought into it, and you do need to be intentional. So one thing to do is to think about, you know, just take 5 minutes extra to plan your online meeting or training or whatever it is, and ask yourself, will this translate? And think about what the experience is like for your audience. I do have a couple examples of this. One example that only works in real life versus how something can translate to online, and I'll share that with you after we look at our options here. So 3 ways I want to share with you today are the 3 you see up here: establishing expectations, using questions and curiosity, and adding activities. Okay, the first one, you saw me do this at the top of my chat here: establish expectations. And this is the long and short of it. Tell your audience you want them to participate. It sounds like a real duh thing, but when we lay out expectations, our audience appreciates it because adults need a roadmap. They need to know where they're going, but they also want to know what's expected of them in a learning or communication situation. So if you tell the audience, hey, I'm going to be asking questions and I want your answers, or I would like everyone to come up with 3 ideas by the time we're done here today, let them know that, and you'll have a much higher rate of engagement with your audience. Second thing, I love using both of these, and these are kind of similar halves of the same coin, questions and curiosity. You saw when I asked you to think about something that engaged you, I asked everyone to write down something. When I asked you to do that, what was that like for you? What kind of went up in your mind? Go ahead and unmute yourself and just throw out an answer.
I was trying to think of something that was like a presentation, but all I could think of was a Kiss tribute concert that my husband did back in the 90s. So at first I was a little worried about giving the wrong answer.
No such thing as a wrong answer here. Okay, so you came up with, you had this vision in your mind right away of a Kiss concert, right?
Kiss tribute concert.
Oh, a tribute concert. So,
Yeah.
Sorry, tribute concert.
Very
so
important.
But it is. But look at what's happening is when someone asks something of you, your mind engages right away. And
Yeah.
that's another way to engage the audience. Doesn't always have to be verbal or physical. It can just be to get them thinking. So notice that when you're asked to do something or think of something, it mentally engages you.
Yeah, can I throw out what I thought?
Yeah, please do.
I immediately had to kind of struggle to think of something that was engaging because it immediately took me back to all the things that I've done today or recently that like were not engaging. So it took me a little bit of a struggle to think of something because of that.
So you kind of had to go through mentally everything in your mind already.
Yeah.
Okay, were you still engaged?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great answer. Thank you. So questions is one thing I really love to use the audience, to engage the audience, not use for the audience. And I want to show you a couple of examples. You saw what I did at the start of class. This is a book I have. You can see it on the left-hand side, purchased at Barnes & Noble for the low, low price of $6.98. But I love these question books because they give me something to either spark discussions or spark icebreakers with my students and my corporate clients. And you can get these books at Barnes & Noble. There are actually games you can buy that are nothing but boxes of questions. And you can see examples of the questions that are in this book on the right-hand side. I'll show you an example of how I use these in a little bit. I have some images to share with you. But questions get people thinking, they get their mind engaged, and will get them talking. Now, obviously, if you have a goal you want to achieve, you will probably have more pointed questions or questions related to the topic. But this is one great way to connect with your audience. Another way that a lot of my clients like to use questions, if you are someone who needs to have a connection with the audience before you begin speaking because you feel nervous unless you get to know the audience, start with questions. It can be a survey about the topic you're talking about. I use it to check for knowledge. Some people just start with things as little as, how was your commute in today? Or these days, no commute. What are you doing during quarantine? Randy has asked some really great questions at the start of these coffee chats. So here's another way I use questions. I use questions to create curiosity. And by creating curiosity, we're framing the topic we're talking about differently. And it's also landing differently with our listeners, and they become more engaged. So for this next example, I'm going to show you one way to present something and another way to present it by using a question and creating curiosity. For this example, what you need to know is that, much as I'm embarrassed to admit it, I love Taylor Swift and I love Radiohead, and that'll come up in a second. So let's say I'm teaching an economics class. I could, if I'm talking about what opportunity costs are, I could just barf out the definition like you see it on my screen here. And this is true, this is accurate, and this is what an opportunity cost defined is. Opportunity cost represent the cost to an individual investor or business when another alternative is chosen. Okay, great. That's defined, but if I just barf that out to my audience, it doesn't really do anything for them. They might take notes, they might remember what it is. But what if I turned it into more of a discussion? And I say something like this. I have tickets to see Taylor Swift on September 15th. They were $150, and I have a nosebleed seat to see Taylor Swift. On September 14th, I win tickets to see Radiohead on September 15th. What's my opportunity cost if I go to see Radiohead? What happened when I threw out that question or that example of Taylor Swift versus Radiohead.
It was much more engaging. It was much more interesting.
Yeah, why so, Allison?
Because for someone who was an English major and never took economics, it was a little bit something I couldn't quite conceptualize, and this helped make it more in my world, I think.
Yeah, exactly. When we're asking questions and we're putting also kind of some images to it, it's easier to conceptualize versus just a straightforward definition or some straightforward information. So that's another way you can use it. Create some curiosity, create some engagement by using questions. And then the third thing I love to do, huge fan of this, in person and online, is activities. So how do you bring activities in, or more importantly, where do you find them? Well, they are all over. You can start out with a simple online search, and I have an example to show you here. So can everyone still see my screen? Make sure you can see this. So I use DuckDuckGo, and a simple online search for something like activities for meetings will give you all sorts of articles and blogs giving you ideas for meeting activities. Now, a lot of these are for in-person, so you'll want to see if they can translate to online. And again, I'll give you an example in just a moment. So this was a good article I found, 31 morning meeting activities. You're probably not going to do a ball toss like they suggest here, but you might do one where people are working on what they call an opposite problem. And the opposite problem is, let's say you're brainstorming to solve a problem. Rather than saying, how do we solve this problem, you come up with the opposite problem, such as, instead of trying to get more customers, let's brainstorm ways to lose customers. And it sounds silly, but it is a really great creativity generating activity to do. So you can find these online. Let me switch back to my slides.
While you're switching, I'll just throw this out. I love the idea of having these specific activities. What I hate is an icebreaker that just says, tell me one fun thing about you, because I have no idea what somebody else might consider fun or whatever. And I will give a shout out to Regina, who's on the call here, for doing my favorite ever icebreaker. It was like 8 or 10 people I didn't know. And her question to us was, what was your favorite breakfast cereal as a kid? And suddenly that was something that we could all relate to. And actually I got to know them better than if I found out, that they wanted to bungee jump someday. So thank you, Gina, for that, and for those resources on how to find more specific ones.
Yeah, and Randy, thanks for that. And does everyone here know what an icebreaker is? It's a small activity or question designed to give a short answer, but also allow a group to kind of get to know each other a little bit. And Randy, I love that example. And I agree with Randy. I hate, tell us something about yourself. It's too broad, it's too general. And like I said before, adult learners need that direction. So something finite like, tell us your favorite breakfast cereal as a kid, that's great. 2 other places to find them, shameless plug, there's a book on Amazon called 21 Ways to Engage Your Audience. Wow, I wonder who wrote that book. Spoiler alert, it was me. And it's the whopping price of $1.99. And so feel free to check that out. And my favorite website for finding short, easy activities is icebreakers.ws. Icebreakers has icebreakers on it, obviously, but they also have group activities. And what I really like about this website is that they break it up by, you can do categories, you can do large groups, small groups. It's such a useful website. Use that many, many times. Now, I promised you an example of things that only work in the real world versus things that I have translated to the online world. So one of my favorite in-person activities when I am indeed with a group is this in-person game. And I'm just going to show you an example of it. It's called Zip, Zap, Zop.
Zip, zap, zop. Zip, zap, zop. Zip, zap, zop. Zip, zap, zop.
Okay, and I got to stop the video. Whoops. And can everyone see my screen again?
Not right now.
Make sure I'm let's share it then. There we go. So Zip Zap Zop is a very simple theater game, and the point of it is to create a community, get people together, get comfortable with eye contact, but also be paying attention and listening. So it has many purposes that are great online as well. But this game, because it requires eye contact and quick responses and throwing the zip around the circle, it doesn't work online. And I have yet to find a way to replicate it online. Don't think I will. Okay. But here's something that I was able to translate to an online meeting. This is an icebreaker. And at Loyola, what I do every Wednesday is Whiteboard Wednesday, where I ask a question and the students get markers and come up and write their answers. This particular icebreaker was, what's something you haven't done yet that you'd like to do in your life? And there are their answers. Well, on March 13th, everything went online and I didn't want to stop this. So we moved everything into a Facebook group. And there is still a Whiteboard Wednesday where we ask questions. So again, being a little more intentional, thinking about what am I doing here? What is the point of it? Will it translate? And how can I translate it? Okay. Some final tips, thinking about using this stuff or doing this stuff. Find inspiration everywhere. I love the Garth Brooks concert example because that's why I've got a picture of Wayne Coyne blowing bubbles. I got ideas for my training when I went to a Flaming Lips concert. And if you've never been, the Flaming Lips are amazing. They are fun, they are interactive. And this particular concert I was at, they were throwing out beach balls and everybody, Wayne Coyne threw light pens to everybody so we could have them to play with and flashlights during a specific song. So I borrowed stuff I saw at that concert for my in-person training. Another thing to know about adult listeners is that everyone has a different learning style and different learning preferences. So mix it up. One person talking does not do it for most of the population. So use slides for your visual learners, images. If you notice you love the music and interactivity of Garth Brooks, bring that into your meetings. You can do it. During these days, my one big thing is be compassionate and flexible. Not everyone's going to want to speak up, especially if they're at home or they've got their kids in the background or whatever is going on. So those are my tips for you. And thinking about this very quick chat I've given you, please write down one thing you're going to try or work into your meetings or your online trainings or in person, because we will be in person one day. Write one thing you're going to try after today. And after you've had a chance to write down your action item, feel free to share it in the chat box if you feel comfortable. But I'd like to hear from you. What questions do you want to ask me? Feel free to either ask verbally or send them in the chat box and Randy will share them with me.
Michelle said that one thing that she's going to start doing is starting her presentations with a relevant question, which I love.
I love it.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything that they want to share or what they, or any questions that they have? I really like the ideas of the, of moving Whiteboard Wednesday to online, because that, it looked like the perfect kind of thing that can translate. Jake says that he's going to try to work Flaming Lips into his meeting presentations from now on, and Jared says he's going to incorporate multiple speakers. But Emily has a question. Do you have specific tips for groups of 100 plus?
Meaning online or in person or both?
Online.
Online. Okay. So yeah, that's a great question, because when it is a larger group, it does get a lot trickier, because we're not going to say, hey, there's 100 of us, everyone introduce yourself. But what I do recommend for groups is if you're using Zoom, they have something called breakout rooms. And that is a great way to get them talking to each other. So you can always assign a quick icebreaker question, put them in breakout rooms and have them chat to each other. For large groups online, I love using the chat box, because that's another way I'll take back and forth as well. And it can also be, if you are able to be in touch with the group ahead of time, giving them some sort of tiny assignments, some pre-work to then either talk about with each other or to reflect on while you're in the meeting or the training. That's a good way to kind of get them mentally engaged before, but then also once the meeting starts.
Thank you. I have 170 people on a Zoom in 2 hours, so this is very relevant.
Okay, good, great. Yay, I'm glad you were here.
Well, along those lines, Jake wants to know what you think is the ideal size for a Zoom breakout group.
Meaning the breakout, like the size to start and then break them out, or
I think
many
probably
people?
how many people make for a good Zoom breakout, I think is
Yeah,
what Jake's asking.
how many people should Emily put in each of her breakout rooms?
Depending on what you want to achieve, I would say the upper limit is like 6 to 8. If you're putting something like 10 in a breakout room, I have faith that they will talk to each other, but again, depending on what you want the discussion outcome to be. So I try to cap the breakout rooms at about 6 to 8 per group.
That seems to be a good size. I've been in 3 to 4 person groups, and that almost felt like too intimate. That size group that you're saying sounds pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately you have to work with what you have, but I could see where 3 to 4, if you're in a breakout room of 3 people and 2 of them don't feel like talking, it's all on that one person, which can be tricky.
Chris, by the way, liked the idea of the whiteboard, not just for online, but the whiteboard for a future meeting and brainstorming session. So,
oh, great.
Thanks for sharing that tip.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? I kind of want to go through the group, and I have a question for everybody now. So we have heard about Radiohead, Flaming Lips, Taylor Swift, Garth Brooks, and a Kiss tribute show. I'm curious, of all of those, if everybody could only go to one of those shows, which they would pick. Oh, start with you, Mary.
Ooh, that's tough. I'm gonna go Radiohead.
All right, Jake.
I'm gonna stick with Flaming Lips.
Sydney.
Taylor Swift for sure.
Okay. Emily, are you sticking with Garth?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Jessica. I think you may be muted, Jessica. Which of those shows would you go to? I think we're still missing that. You can put it in the box maybe. Okay, the Kiss tribute show. All right, who else? Did anybody else want to jump in and say which of the shows they would go to? George asked the options again: Radiohead, Flaming Lips, Taylor Swift, Garth Brooks, Kiss tribute.
Now,
Taylor Swift.
I have to clarify.
Radiohead for me, definitely.
Okay.
The Kiss tribute, they didn't dress up like Kiss. They wore all black and they had Christmas lights wrapped around them, and they sang a slow ballad first, and then they went into some rock. And as soon as they went into the rock thing, they lit up. It was the best concert I've ever been to.
Nice.
Okay, wow.
It
good.
was a little Flaming Lips-ish, actually.
Oh, okay.
So.
Yeah, it's very Flaming
Taylor
Lips.
Swift's
I
the only one
haven't
I haven't been to,
I
so
actually,
I'd say Taylor Swift.
I like Jared's answer.
We do have one more real question before we wrap up. So Krista wanted to know, Mayor, when you have seen breakout sessions in Zoom, do you recommend an assigned facilitator or that it be something that's kind of spontaneously led? And I've seen both, and so I'm curious what you think works better.
Yeah, I've seen both. It depends on what you want to achieve. I think the medium balance, which is how I tend to work it, is I'll put people in breakout rooms, give them a topic to discuss or, piggyback off of an assignment. But then what I do as the facilitator is I go into each room one at a time, kind of like the teacher walking around to peek in on them. And I actually find that that's very effective.
Very cool.
So yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Krista.
And Regina, a couple more people are weighing in on the concert. Regina would go to Garth Brooks. Krista Campbell would see Radiohead. So, all right, I promised this was a 30-minute coffee break and then we could all get back to work. So we will wrap it up. There is Mayor's website. Also, I don't have a slide with it, but if you follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, or my website, I'll be announcing the next ones of these coffee breaks. We're going to try to do one a week for a while. So next week, we are talking about how to get started if you have an amazing book idea. So check out my website, Facebook, LinkedIn for how to sign up for that if you're not already. So thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. Have a good rest of the day. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.